They say Texas makes its own legends. If that's true, Trevor Rees-Jones is one of the state's handcrafted ones, equal parts stubborn wildcatter, savvy dealmaker, and quiet philanthropist. His story isn't about an overnight fortune or a single lucky strike. It's a long, stubborn climb. A career that begins in law, moves into risk-soaked drilling, survives boom and bust, and ends with a payday big enough to transform a private man into a public giver. This is the life of Trevor Rees-Jones. He was born in 1951 and raised in University Park, a tidy enclave inside the Dallas metro area. The son of a lawyer and the grandson of a Welsh preacher, he learned early what mattered: discipline, duty, and a certain stubborn optimism that would later see him through dozens of dry holes and seismic shifts in the energy business. Education came first. Highland Park High, Dartmouth College, then a law degree from Southern Methodist University's Dedman School of Law. A path that could easily have led to a comfortable life practicing law back in Dallas. But that wasn't how Rees-Jones was wired. If you want the short biography, here it is. A lawyer who became a wildcatter, who founded Chief Oil and Gas in 1994, who built that company into one of the most accomplished independent natural gas producers in the United States, and who, after decades of drilling and deal-making, sold a chunk of those producing assets for roughly $2.6 billion in 2022. But the short version doesn't carry the grit, the late nights, and the blistering taste of failure that shaped him. To understand how a Dallas attorney turned his hand to drilling and became a billionaire, you need to go back to the early 1980s, when Rees-Jones first began buying mineral rights and funding exploratory wells. As a young lawyer, Rees-Jones specialized in bankruptcy and oil and gas reorganization law, a backstage seat that exposed him to the financial mechanics of the petroleum business. Representing creditors and navigating the tangled legal aftermath of failed operators, he learned how the industry worked, which assets were undervalued, which wells might be coaxed back to life, and which leases hid potential. That time in the courtroom and at the negotiating table taught him how to read balance sheets the way other men read seismic charts. By 1984, he'd begun making hands-on investments, rounding up money, buying leases, and paying for wells to be drilled. He never imagined there would be easy wins. In fact, the first decade of that effort was defined by risk. There's a favorite line in profiles of Rees-Jones. At one point, he drilled 17 dry holes in a row. Think about that for a second. 17 attempts that yielded nothing but paper losses and tough phone calls. For many people, that would be the end. The checkbook closed, the dreams folded into a lawyer's briefcase. For Rees-Jones, it was the opposite. Those failures, he later said, taught him more than success ever could. They hardened his appetite for detail, for diligence, for the one thing every oil man needs when the earth refuses to cooperate: persistence. That stubborn persistence would become his defining strategy, a willingness to go where others wouldn't, to buy acreage no one else wanted, and to take shots that most would call reckless. In 1994, he formalized that approach by founding Chief Oil and Gas. The timing was awkward by design. He targeted the Fort Worth Basin and the Barnett Shale at a moment when conventional wisdom urged avoidance. George Mitchell and a handful of pioneers had shown unconventional shale gas was possible, but the technology and economics were still emerging. Rees-Jones liked that. He liked being contrarian. He liked a deal that required work, conviction, and patience. Chief grew not overnight, but over decades. A slow build of acreage, carefully negotiated partnerships, and an appetite for unconventional plays long before unconventional was a buzzword. There are two ways to build wealth in oil and gas. You either get lucky on the geology, or you get very, very skilled at business. Rees-Jones did the latter. He became a master at sourcing mineral rights and assembling packages of leases that, when combined with modern drilling techniques, produced value far beyond the individual pieces. He understood the midstream and marketing side as well, how to move gas to market and how to get paid for it. As Chief matured, its footprint expanded from North Texas to the Marcellus and beyond. The company's operations turned into consistent cash flow, which in turn funded further acquisitions and the kind of sustained investment that most smaller independents couldn't afford. Rees-Jones is often described in profiles as a throwback, the kind of oilman who still relies on handshake deals and old-fashioned negotiating. People who worked with him talk about his Texas drawl and his charisma. He could walk into a room and quickly get people to like him, but he was also reputed to be one of the toughest negotiators in the business. That combination is lethal in energy. Charm opens doors, toughness closes deals. It helped him structure complex transactions and also survive the inevitable pushback from investors who sometimes felt they'd been offered lowball exits. Those disputes surfaced in lawsuits over buyouts and minority interests, but they didn't slow Chief's ascent. They're part of the mythos, too. A reminder that in oil and gas, as in life, the line between shrewd bargain and hardball can be thin. If there's a single theme in Rees-Jones's career, it's endurance. He weathered the early years of cheap gas, when selling gas at $2 per McF was normal, and the later periods when prices spiked, contracts shifted, and the market moved like a temperamental animal. In 2006, Chief made headlines by selling a massive tract of leasehold and proved reserves to Devon Energy for about $2.2 billion in cash, and it sold midstream assets for hundreds of millions more. Moves that showed Rees-Jones could both buy and sell at the right time. He wasn't a day trader. He was a long-term player who knew when to harvest. Those earlier sales and disciplined reinvestment set the stage for the biggest deal of his career, the 2022 transaction with Chesapeake Energy, that would crystallize decades of effort into a headline number. In January 2022, Chief Oil and Gas completed a transaction that grabbed national attention, an approximately $2.6 billion deal with Chesapeake Energy for producing assets and acreage, a cash and stock package that reflected both the quality of Chief's holdings and the discipline of its operator. The sale was not the result of a whim, but the culmination of years of building a portfolio that produced reliable cash flow and attractive margins in a market that increasingly rewards scale and efficiency. That deal supercharged Rees-Jones's personal wealth and allowed him and his wife to dramatically scale their philanthropic commitments. It was the payoff of decades of toil and a textbook example of what patient capital can accomplish in a capital-intensive industry. Which brings us to a side of Trevor Rees-Jones that often surprises people who picture a lone man and a drilling rig, the philanthropist. In 2006, Trevor and his wife Jan founded the Rees-Jones Foundation, and since then the foundation has become one of the largest private grant makers in North Texas. The scope is striking: tens of millions to local hospitals, children's charities, museums, scouting programs, and education initiatives. Among the marquee gifts was a $25 million contribution to the Perot Museum of Nature and Science, enough to name exhibition halls and leave a permanent civic legacy. The Foundation's annual summaries show grant-making in the tens and sometimes hundreds of millions, and in recent years, the couple directed enormous sums toward medical, educational, and faith-based causes. For a man who once measured success in the number of dry holes he could endure, his later life measured success in the lives he could help change. There are a few vivid anecdotes that capture who Trevor is outside the boardroom. He owns Cook Canyon Ranch, a sprawling property west of Dallas that's become a private compound and an artful retreat. For his 60th birthday, he reportedly hosted Dan Aykroyd, Jim Belushi, and the Blues Brothers Band, followed by the Eagles, with 24 private jets on the Strip and friends who showed up for the music and the sense of kinship. He keeps African animals at the ranch, including giraffes, and throws gatherings that feel part Texas Lodge, part private museum. Those stories might sound like opulence, and they are in a way, but they also reveal how he channels his resources toward experiences, relationships, and conservation. The ranch is both a personal refuge and a hub for his philanthropic and social circles. What of his leadership style? People who've worked for him describe a straightforward, demanding boss with a surprising warmth. He's reportedly approachable in ways that matter. He talks to everyone, remembers their names, and expects a high level of performance in return. He pushes hard on deals, but once an agreement is struck, it's treated as sacrosanct. That combination of integrity and insistence on competence built loyalty and enabled the sort of long-term relationships that are essential in upstream energy, where multi-year development cycles reward trust. Those relationships were the engine behind many of Chief's biggest moves. There's another layer to the story that shouldn't be ignored: Rees-Jones's faith and conviction that wealth carries responsibility. The Rees-Jones Foundation's public communications often refer to a mission informed by Christian values, service, stewardship, and the idea that wealth should function as a tool to help the vulnerable. This isn't perfunctory giving, it's strategic philanthropy, funding health systems, children's programs, foster care initiatives, and international medical missions. In 2024, the foundation reported continuing large grants and a focus on child welfare and medical advancements, underlining that the couple saw their windfall not as a finish line, but as a means to a larger social mission. For Rees-Jones, legacy seemed less about mansions and more about institutions that outlast any single person. But the path to billions wasn't without controversy. Oil and gas deals often involve minority investors, complex buyouts, and disputes that can turn public. Rees-Jones has faced criticism and lawsuits alleging aggressive buyouts of minority interests. And the industry itself has been the target of environmental scrutiny, regulatory shifts, and changing public opinion. Rees-Jones navigated that terrain with a careful mix of conservative stewardship, legal savvy, and public giving that smoothed local relationships. He also reoriented his giving toward health and family services in ways that shielded his philanthropic identity from being defined solely by extraction. Those choices matter. In regions where energy wealth is abundant, the social license to operate comes from how much of that wealth is reinvested into the community. So how did he become a billionaire? There's no single alchemy. It was an accumulation strategy. Buy the right leases, persist through failures, scale the company responsibly, harvest at the right time, reinvest and diversify, and finally monetize through strategic sales. The 2006 Devon deal and the 2022 Chesapeake transaction bookend years of compounding value. Along the way, Rees-Jones proved he could adapt, moving from conventional plays to shale, from operator to seller, and from private accumulation to public giving. Forbes and other wealth trackers list him among America's billionaires, an outcome of both geological luck and managerial skill. If you want a portrait and practical lessons from his life, here are a few that keep returning in conversations about him. First, persistence beats panic. The man who drilled a long string of dry holes didn't stop, he learned. Second, be contrarian when others are complacent, but disciplined when others are wild. Buy the acreage no one wants, only if you can run it better than anyone else. Third, cultivate relationships. Rees-Jones's deals usually involved trusted partners and long-standing associates who helped him scale operations. Fourth, treat wealth as a tool. His foundation and huge donations make clear he views capital as something to be deployed, not hoarded. Those rules aren't unique to oil, but in an industry that rewards timing and temperament, they were decisive. One more wrinkle worth noting. Rees-Jones is not a publicity junkie. Despite his wealth and influence, he generally avoids the glare reserved for public CEOs or elected officials. He prefers to operate locally and quietly, a donor on the museum plaque and a funder of hospitals rather than a constant headline. That low profile may make him less known outside energy and Dallas circles, but it also underscores a temperament shaped by a generation that prized discretion over celebrity. For that reason, his story often reads like a rediscovered legend, the kind of regional titan who shapes a city and then steps back to let the institutions he built, museums, hospitals, camps for kids, speak in his place. And what of the future? Rees-Jones is in his 70s now, and the Chesapeake sale reshaped his position in the industry. But the sale didn't signal a retreat from influence. Instead, it funded an expansion of philanthropic ambition and created financial bandwidth to pursue targeted investments and grants that align with his values. Whether through funding medical research, supporting child welfare, or investing in faith-based humanitarian work, his later years look less like retirement and more like a second act, trading the drill bit for the foundation ledger. That pivot is revealing. For Rees-Jones, making money was never the final note. The final note is the echo it leaves in a community when used thoughtfully. If you're looking for irony, here it is. A man who made fortunes extracting energy now uses that fortune to support life-saving hospitals, children's programs, and educational institutions. It's the neat kind of narrative arc writers love, the rugged entrepreneur turned generous civic steward. But the reality is messier and more human. Rees-Jones's journey is built on failed wells, hard bargains, long nights in the negotiation room, and a stubborn belief that patient effort, not flash or headline, yields enduring results. That combination hardened his character and eventually his capacity to give back in meaningful ways. So what can listeners take away from Trevor Rees-Jones's life? First, persistence and craft matter more than luck. Second, reputation, built on fairness, firmness, and follow-through, is a currency as valuable as cash in deal-making. Third, scale and timing matter. Compound modest advantages over decades, and the numbers add up. And finally, the axis of money and meaning need not be binary. For Rees-Jones, wealth became a lever for both private enjoyment and public good, a paradox that feels quintessentially American. This is a story about grit, about the long run, about the slow accumulation of value that finally affords choices most people never reach. It's both gloriously Texan and quietly principled. A man who left the courtroom not because it was easy to make the jump, but because he couldn't imagine spending his life reading other people's contracts when he knew how to write his own. Trevor Rees-Jones's life teaches us that some fortunes aren't built in a single stroke of genius, but in the patient repetition of competent decisions, over and over again, through dry spells and windfalls alike. If you liked this deep dive into a man who reshaped parts of the American energy landscape and then turned that reshaping into civic investment, consider the quiet power of long projects in your own life. Not every venture requires a mega deal. Sometimes it's the steady, stubborn work, the 17th hole that finally finds oil, that pays off. In the end, Trevor Rees-Jones is less a headline and more a lesson. Build patiently, negotiate honestly, give generously. The rest will follow.